Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. Todd Taskey is your host. Chad Frazen is your guest from Rise 25. Chad, great to have you today.
Hey, thank you so much, Todd. Great to be here.
Hey, so first of all, before I jump in, let me thank our sponsor, the good folks at Fiscal Advocate. Chad, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they provide financial support and resources specifically to agency founders and owners. Not only financial support, but they create metrics and models for agencies to understand where they are in the spectrum of all agencies out there and what makes them attractive for potential buyers and acquirers and the rest. So they've got a great organization. You can find their contact information in the show notes. But thank you to the folks at Fiscal Advocate. Chad, you're on today because at Rise 25, which we've partnered with for a long time, you are the guru of thought leadership. And so today you're on board to join us and to kind of flip the script a little bit. So I will let you take it from here.
Okay. Hey, thanks so much, Todd. Great to talk to you. Hey, today I would like to get into things that can affect an entrepreneur from outside of the entrepreneur's business. You know, obviously, most entrepreneurs want to do whatever they can to grow their business, and they work inside their business to scale things up. But I know that there are a lot of macro forces that can impact a business beyond maybe what's going on inside of a business specifically. Why don't we get into that a little bit and kind of give me an overview?
Yeah, that is a very interesting point. It's tricky in a couple of different ways, but because most entrepreneurs are control folks, and they feel like if I can control my business and I can grow it at 10 or 20 or whatever the number is every year as a percentage of last year, that I can model all this out and I'll know the right time for a transaction or for an opportunity. And there's a couple of thoughts to that. I would say a positive and a negative. The positive is that there are opportunities that come and go in the marketplace from a macro perspective. And we talked about this actually. Ned McPherson was on the podcast last year. We got a tremendous transaction for him last year. He does conversion rate optimization. And we did a great transaction. They were sold to Power Digital, which is a great fit for them. Both parties are experiencing a lot of success post-transaction. Power Digital really wanted to improve their conversion rate optimization. They have so many customers that Ned couldn't get to. Ned is accelerating at a rate that he didn't think he could ever do before, and he was really growing well before the transaction. Power Digital now does not need conversion rate optimization anymore. Power Digital is going to be a much more formidable competitor in that service offering, which changes the dynamic for all other folks doing conversion rate optimization. So the positive to it is that there are opportunities outside of your business that will have a greater impact in the overall value of your business than perhaps growing the company to be 10 or 15 or 20% larger over the next year or two. And that is what we saw with Ned. We see that with a lot of our clients, particularly at the lower end of the middle market, that 1 to 2 to 3 million of EBITDA range. Because, and again, Ned was a great example. I would say we got him the very high end of the range in terms of value. He got a great chunk of that in equity. He's an equity holder in Power Digital. And so his second bite should be a pretty significant one for him when Power does a future transaction. On the other side of the equation, I talked to a lot of guys that want to continue, they've had great growth and they're going to grow. They've been growing at, let's say, 20% a year, and they want to grow 20% in the next couple of years, and then they'll consider a transaction. But with the impact that private equity is having in the digital marketing space, and with the companies that are gaining greater competency in multiple areas and accelerating their offering, I think it will become more challenging to continue to grow at that 20%. by doing the things that you've always been doing. So there's macro forces that are out there, I guess to a certain degree, like there's always been, that are making the world more opportunistic and also more competitive at the same time.
How in the digital space are things becoming more competitive?
I would say mostly from there being better competitors, and they become better competitors because they have more resources. Again, the influence of private equity. So they have more resources that they can apply to do a better job retaining customers. They'll add, an agency can add more client success managers. They can add more into their outreach, more into their marketing, more into their sales function. And so we're seeing that, like, I think the evolution of most marketplaces, that there are, winners and also rans. And I think private equity is having a significant impact in that way.
Would you say that most entrepreneurs, even though it sounds like a good idea because it's their business, they might be hesitant to joining forces with somebody else?
It's interesting. The thing I hear most, Chad, from entrepreneurs is, I didn't know I could do this. Meaning I didn't know so in most transactions that we do, our clients get a big chunk of cash at close, and they also get equity, which creates the second bite opportunity for them. And then if, for example, Ned has a C-level role at Power Digital. We did a great transaction. Also, Andrew Kalidas is on the podcast, that digital impulse we sold to Demand Drive last summer. And he has a very significant role at Demand Drive as they continue to expand their offerings in their vertical. And so these are guys that play a significant role and have a significant chunk of equity for a second bite. And so that's what they're seeing as opportunities that they didn't realize existed before. And as an example, we did a transaction that one on the end there was Sproutword. Kevin Biondi is also on the podcast if you want to listen to that. But Kevin did a really great transaction, and he now is part of an organization that has almost a dozen salespeople. Before that, they had zero. Their data platform is now being presented to probably 4 or 5 times the amount of prospects on a monthly basis. He's freed himself up from all the business management responsibilities and is really now back focused on what he is most excited about doing, which is helping clients solve problems and understanding what their proprietary data means to them so they can be more effective with that data. And so when you find the right fit, the economics are really important. But combining the economics with the opportunity, not only for a significant second bite, but the opportunity to play a role in a bigger, broader offering, is what our clients, hire us to do for them.
So how does that growth kind of occur? Is it just because there's more people involved?
That's part of it. I would encourage people, if they wanted to, Grayson LaFrenz, who's the founder and the executive chairman now of Power Digital, was on the podcast a couple years ago. And he talks about how they grew Power Digital from 5 million of EBITDA to 30 million of EBITDA in just 3 years. And they did that as a part of Periscope Equity, who was their private equity sponsor. They acquired 4 or 5 businesses. They cross-sold those really well. They were very well thought out acquisitions. So it wasn't a roll-up strategy like people might assume. It was more creating an arc of services, which means you have more wallet share. When you offer more services to customers, you get better retention. So in a very thoughtful way, if you architect the type of service offering that your target customer base wants, you become more competitive, you become more resilient, you become more valuable.
So let's say I'm an entrepreneur, I'm feeling proud of I'm starting to execute my vision. Things are going pretty well. And I hear about this and I come to you and I think, okay, it sounds like a good idea. I'm hesitant to surrender control, but what would be the process then? Like, okay, sounds good. I'm going to go for it. What kind of happens after that?
Yeah, a very good question. Because here's what I tell people. We often have this conversation that if we go into a process, that means we'll make sure your financials are right and buttoned down and accurate according to GAAP and that they're accrued for properly. We'll have a short deck that talks about the company. And then we'll talk to, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 potentially interested prospects that understand the space and have a checkbook to acquire a business and do not care about your feelings. And when we have those conversations, you will hear over and over and over again the same themes. And the only reason that you won't do a transaction is because of value, that the value is not what you thought it would be. And if you don't realize the value, and this is the really important point, if you don't realize the value, you will know that the marketplace doesn't like the fact, to make it up, that you do too much of this and not enough of that. And, then there's the other thing. So then if you plan to work really hard for the next year or two or three anyways, and now if I just focus on improving this, that, and the other thing, I will build a business that's more valuable to the marketplace because the marketplace told me that. The guys with the checkbooks told me this is why. Or, and this is also important, you might look in the mirror or look to your partner and say, let me tell you something. This, that, and the other thing, that's a lot of work. And it's going to take a big investment to accomplish those objectives. And when we do it, we only get this much more, depending on where the value was and what you thought it would be and the rest. I don't think it's worth it to do that. So if we take this transaction, we get the cash up front, and then we have equity, and then we've solved our problems. We've solved the problems of having a sales force, adding additional service line, not having enough capital, not wanting to invest as much in sales or client success or whatever the case may be. And that's what we get from the process. The process will either produce a really good opportunity that you're thrilled with, or you will have a clear roadmap on the areas to focus on to improve the value of your business. That's the outcome of the process.
And that improvement can be kickstarted by working with somebody who doesn't care about my feelings.
The thing is, you hire a consultant and the consultant wants to keep you on board, right? The consultant, you're paying for them. A private equity guy doesn't care about your feelings, but also knows the space. And it's not that they're mean or rude, that it's just that the facts are what the facts are. And your retention is not this, or your average customer size is not that, or we don't like the vertical that you're in, or you don't offer enough services to retain these people long enough, whatever it might be. And I don't care if it's one person's opinion, but when it becomes a repetitive theme, I think we should pay attention to that.
How does an entrepreneur know what is a good fit when joining into a partnership like this?
That's tricky for sure, right? It's a bad analogy, but how do you know that the woman you're going to marry will be your wife for the rest of your life? So, part of it is understanding the fit that how we fit into what they want to accomplish. Part of it is understanding their vision for the future. Part of it is understanding, all of those things and getting to know the personalities. The thing that I hear from clients most often is that not a lot of things have changed, that I still work in the manner that I've always worked at, right? we're actually recording an episode now with a whole bunch of former clients that have done transactions. And we've asked them the question, do you really have a boss now? And I would say all of them say things are different, right? You don't get a whole bunch of money and nothing changes. But the biggest change is probably the thoughtfulness that goes into making an important decision. And there's a lot of rigor, and there's other smart people in the room. And yes, it's different, but it makes me a better entrepreneur, is what I hear most often.
When when maybe you bring these two parties together, is there like a multiple dating process? I guess, to use the marriage analogy, like we're talking to this person and these guys, and we're trying to see, who's the best fit if we move forward.
Very good question. Yeah. So typically what happens is, we'll create a list. We'll do a whole bunch of outreach with that deck, that intro deck that I had mentioned to you. And then I'll do, I don't know, let's say 50 calls so that the client does 20 calls. Those calls are about an hour. Those could be 20, 30, 40 calls. Those are about an hour. And then from that, people will express, hey, this is exactly what we're looking for and we're interested in, here's why. And they will fit what our client's looking for. Oftentimes our clients aren't quite sure what they're looking for. So what they want are data points. I'd like to talk to some where we partner with private equity so that we can grow out the business ourselves and we can be responsible for future acquisitions. And others represent us fitting into a bigger narrative. And it's hard to know until I get a bunch of these. It's surprising because when you talk to a dozen of them, you get real clarity around how you think you want to fit into the future. And then you'll also get that kind of emotional response. I sometimes use the analogy for those that have visited college campuses with their kids, and they look at you and say, Jesus, I think this is the place. And you say, well, how come? What do you like about it? I'm like, you know what? It just feels like it's the right place. And you will get that sense from the other people on that call. And then ultimately what will happen is we will ask to have an indication of interest from those parties that are interested. So we might get 4 or 5 or 8 indications of interest. And then from those indications, which is a combination of value and structure and things of that nature, we'll invite usually 3 or 4 or 5 for a management presentation. And this will be on the home court of the team. Some people feel uncomfortable about bringing folks like that through their office, so we'll do it offsite. And then that is a half-day meeting, Chad. That's 3 to 4 hours of much deeper dive, spending time with each other. There's usually a lunch or a dinner associated with that, so you get to meet people, in a personal context. And then after that, we ask each group to give us an indication of a letter of intent, a little bit more than the indication of interest. We'll negotiate those letters, and then we'll decide who we want to partner with. And then from the time that we sign a letter of intent, we probably have 60 to 75 days of quality of earnings, due diligence, legal negotiation, all those things to get a deal to close.
What would you say? Is there anything that's like a most common reservation that an entrepreneur might have, even no matter how great the idea sounds? This is my child, and I don't want to give him or her up. Is there a reservation is unreasonable, but people can't get past themselves?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's the case. And again, the analogy, I'll stick with the college one, right? At some point, you realize if you view your child as an independent human being, you might love them living in your house, as I did. But at some point, they need to go off to college. At some point, they need to become all that they can become. And I most of the people we serve have very successful businesses. They're making $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million a year. It's not for me to tell them that they shouldn't do that anymore, right? But it feels like people get to the point and they realize I'm the bottleneck to this blossoming. And it's not me. There's 50 or 80 or 150 people that work for us. And these people deserve bigger opportunities. And we're going to grow 15% a year. That doesn't create bigger opportunities. And eventually, some of my star teammates, they're going to go find those opportunities elsewhere. So if you look at the life of an organization, a living, breathing organization, which companies are, they need to grow at some point. And at some point, it grows beyond the capability set of the entrepreneur that founded it. And well before those emotional ties are the emotions of frustration and anger and disappointment that they can't do everything that they want to do because they're constricted by the capital resources they have, their risk tolerance, and all the things that come with growing a really nice business.
As you've seen entrepreneurs kind of go through the process that you discussed a little bit earlier, the 3 to 4 hour meeting, the dinner, whatever, and it's kind of like when you know, but like what are the most common reasons why something might work or might not work? Is it a shared vision? Anything else like that?
Yeah, I would say this. Once we start the process, we'll find a fit. I mean, there's always a fit that's out there. So that's not a concern. Mm-hmm. The concern will be, which one do I choose from? Mm. And there'll be 2 or 3 or 5 really good choices. So that's not a concern. It is, am I ready to go down this road and to do this, to have the company now grow beyond something that I can keep my arms around? And we don't ever try to convince somebody they should, but doing a transaction where you still play a meaningful role and that you've taken significant equity off of the table, so all of your net worth's not tied up in the business, and you've created better opportunities for your clients. If for anybody listening to this episode, if you go back to some of the other episodes and you listen to the other entrepreneurs, you hear that more than anything else.
At what point, what is the earliest stage where somebody would maybe qualify for this type of opportunity or be ready for this type of opportunity?
The people that we serve best are $1 million to $5-ish million of EBITDA. And below $1 million, it's just hard to get, buyers' attention. Mm-hmm. Because they want to do something that's meaningful, not only from a service capability, but from a financial impact as well. So I would say anyone that is at $1 million plus, I would be more than happy to have a conversation. The intent of this podcast is to provide a lot of education and not have it be from me, but have it be from people that founded companies and did transactions and had good experiences and bad experiences and what the frustrations were, what the excitements were. So there's plenty of resource here on the Second Bite podcast.
I've talked about how an entrepreneur can overcome their own reservations or whatever. How can an entrepreneur help a buyer or a potential partner overcome any reservations they might have when they go into this process?
It's an evolution, right? I think it's an evolution. And I don't think many people wake up and say, oh my gosh, I should really sell this business. I think it rattles around in their brain for a while, and they lose a competitive circumstance to somebody more well-funded. They lose a couple customers because they wanted more service offering. They lost a salesperson because it's those type of things. And I find that many entrepreneurs could solve those things if they invested more money in their business. And most of the men and women I talk to say, yeah, but I kind of like taking that money home, right? Because it's building the life that we have and paying for mortgages and tuitions and all those other things. So when you compare that to putting a whole bunch of money in my pocket, using other people's money to accomplish the objectives I have and still have a significant upside, that becomes a much more desirable choice at some point in time.
Is there for lack of a better word, that you're particularly proud of during the time that you've been doing this?
I will say, you see all the trophies over my shoulder. Mm-hmm. building something that another smart, educated buyer is willing to write a very significant check for is very, very hard to do. Just building it. And then to get through a transaction, also really, really difficult. So none of these are easy. None of them. They're all challenging. They're all rewarding, and they're all exciting to do. If I had to pick one, I would pick the last one that we just closed because, my gosh, that was so great. We're in the middle of a couple right now, and there's ebbs and flows and good and bad, and clients are frustrated, clients are excited. It is such a great experience, and it's an honor for me to work with somebody and walk them through that process and stay in the fight with them during quality of earnings and managing lawyers and managing the buyer and making sure that they land exactly where they want to and have the kind of outcome that they desired from the very beginning.
Once you've met these two groups together or whatever, how much more involvement do you have after that?
Oh, geez, all the way through until the deal closes.
Okay.
So all the quality of earnings calls, all the due diligence calls, all the negotiations, the working capital conversations, the employment agreement, all of that. We had a call on Monday. It was 90 days after deal close, and we're truing up on the working capital amount. And there was issues as it relates to who gets what and what got counted for properly and what didn't. And so we were fighting that out with our client. And, when we do a transaction, it is a memorable event for the lifetime of our client. And so we're now, we are connected in a way that I treasure for a long, long time. So it's great when we get introduced from past clients to new prospects. It's great when we can solve problems along the way. And so we'll stay engaged and work with clients, hopefully for decades post-transaction.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you still kind of keep tabs or check up on how that pairing is doing, years down the road?
All the time.
Okay, great. Is there anything that people need to know about this opportunity, outside of this entrepreneurial opportunity outside of their own business?
Yeah, I think, Chad, we covered most of it here. So I think we did a pretty good job. I think there are, and this is the tricky part, there's always opportunity. If you're over $1 million of EBITDA and you're running a good business, there's opportunities to do exceptional things in the future with that company. This would be one thing you may want to explore, but I know the people I serve, they get inbound emails and calls and multiple times a week. So you can't go chase all of those things down, right? But if you want to talk to somebody that's, is in that arena on a daily basis to get a sense for what might be available, we'd love to be able to chat. All of our contact information's in the show notes.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, Todd, great to talk to you. Very interesting, very informative. Thanks so much for having me.
Chad, thank you. I was always happy to have this kind of conversation. And again, thanks to our friends at Fiscal Advocate. They do a wonderful job. I'm grateful to have them as our sponsor, and grateful that you could join us today, Chad. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.